Hey everyone! Before we begin today's episode, I would like to remind you guys again to please check out some of my other YouTube channels in the description down below. I have a Star Wars Battlefront 2 Classic Focus channel where I review custom maps and mods on the Battlefront Max channel. I do gaming reviews on the Kanoa Reviews channel, and I've also recently started a Minecraft adventure channel where I play through classic adventures with friends. You can find the links in the description, and please subscribe to those channels if you like what you see. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the episode. 2017 was coming to a close, and the Japanese elections had Shinzo Abe re-elected. His conservative views stood well with those that voted in Japan, which was less than half, comparable to other countries. Because of this, one particular ideology had a dominance over a country where most did not care that much about politics. With turmoil brewing in Asia, and things being said between the American president and leaders of other nations, it was time for some European countries like Germany to decide on a potential warfare plan if one were to come to existence. But decentralized warfare, or guerrilla warfare, were no option for Germany, that had its army potential clipped to a defense force. Rather, it was network-centric warfare that would play a huge part in upcoming conflicts, of which one particular battlefield would be the digital online space. At the same time, Germany agreed on new plans on transatlantic trade to secure a better bond with America that was taking strict precautions on trade tax and import. Russia continued its training of men, several hundred thousands, to keep up with China that was attempting a sprint at creating a large army in such a short time. In March of 2018, Greece, that had struggled with the economic situation for so long, attempted to get through to Germany. Greece's debt problem had gotten so bad, they realistically had no chance of either paying it down or even meeting running interest payments. With the real possibility of a bankruptcy, it was under desperate circumstances that Greek leader Alexis Tsipras had traveled to Germany to plead for Angela Merkel's help. They asked to refinance a large portion of their debt at a low interest rate. Despite Germany having potentially more influence over Greece overall, the financial problems that might arise with this could be so severe that Germany decided to refuse, since their recent economy had shrunk for the first time in a longer while. Next up was Canada in terms of trade agreements with Germany. Merkel wanted to secure the entirety of North America to give the financial situation of her nation a boost. In the US, Trump greenlit the build of new air bases on the West Coast. He promised that shortly after, he would also see to the East Coast and would focus now on America's military strength after having focused on the economy for the past year. And it was not just Germany that wanted new trade deals with America. Japan's Shinzo Abe also wanted new deals to hopefully get a small boost to which they could finance part of the build-up for the 2020 Olympic Games. At the end of July, Trump did indeed focus on the East Coast, but rather than a military focus like he promised, he wanted to create jobs and job opportunities. Though some were a bit confused why the sudden change occurred, others were happy with the new direction he was headed. France's Emmanuel Macron vowed for new railways across the nation. Theresa May was still earning her nickname of the new Thatcher, as she continued her focus on military might with a new program labeled Tanks for Britain. There was no conceivable threat that something were to happen to Britain, so many were surprised with her display of military flexing. China was also focusing on military strength in the form of new fighter planes. They had already taken precautions against enemy fighters, and wanted to ensure that they had dominance over the skies. Poland, on the other hand, wanted dominance over her seas, though they did not feel that any particular nation tried to provoke anything. Greece, at the same time, was busy implementing new air doctrine innovations, mostly to cope with a doctrine that would be fitted for the country's economic situation. Italy, under lead of Silvio Berlusconi, was undergoing army reforms. China for that moment seemed to completely deviate from some of the defensive and military movesets they did a few months back. They seem now entirely focused on creating opportunity for foreign investors. India, on the other hand, looked inward and wanted to provide better schooling opportunities by building more primary schools. Turkey seemed quite paranoid. Whispers had been going through the halls of their government about an increase in dissatisfaction with its own leader. More intelligence stations were built to acquire more data from its inhabitants, but that of course could also be used in an international circle. Germany continued its route towards networked battlefield. As software continued to move into an ever more critical role on the battlefield, they had to ensure that their forces were never lacking on this growing front. By utilizing the latest in these systems, they could ensure their forces would function like one organism, constantly operating and updating from the movements of others. But some were pessimistic. Slowly everything was becoming more computerized. But what would happen if one were to steal the keys to all those robotics and automatism? After Trump had created jobs on the East Coast, he was now doing the same at the West. The air bases he greenlit earlier would mostly be erected there. While the beginning of 2019 announced more job opportunities for Americans, for Canadians, it meant the expansion of urban areas. By now, there were a handful of nations that had undergone rigorous training and recruiting protocols. Though no initiative towards a provocation had been made yet, these nations would play a pivotal role in what was to come. Trump agreed to continue his military path of enhancing the US's air power by producing more advanced fighter models. Canada did the same, but with less advanced models. Mexico in response set in motion an Air Force reform. Not that they saw any threat in what was happening, but some of the things that were said by Trump had some inhabitants on edge. With 2019 being well underway, no one was surprised anymore by Theresa May's display of military might. Artillery for Britain was the next military program for the so manyth time. Turkey now had set its sights on a naval reform, while Greece took it to the skies like so many nations did. Fighter planes would still be useful, even in a mostly digitalized war. Poland, however, thought that submarines needed to be included and continued the build of more advanced models. Japan was currently not occupied with any military display, and was still on the path to glue its economy back together and regain the titles of world's second largest economy. With Angela Merkel's popularity lowering with each year, a final act to reinstate some political power was adhered with the Auffangbank concept. In Latin America, on the other side of the globe, nations like Argentina headed for a direction of infantry equipment development. Many of the countries here still had the equipment that was outdated, and with so much military might at display by world leaders, it was time for some of these nations to join in as well, or at least keep up with the times. But America was not that worried about its military concern anymore. Despite China still being a possible threat if something were to arise, Trump continued to focus on its economy and issued moves to reduce market regulations. He thought that these recent endeavors to enhance his country's air power would suffice for the coming time. In Russia, Putin issued orders to instate better intel offices throughout the nation, not only to keep an eye on continents like the Americas, but also neighboring China or paranoid nations like Turkey. This, of course, was all done in the shadows. China now focused on creating more railways, connecting its huge nation and its people. But something seemed off. Things were escalating in nearby Hong Kong for many months now, and China had given no official response of any action, despite its government being distinctively linked with that of China. Some people were afraid that either the Hong Kong situation or Taiwan could be used to put fuel on a fire which would be useful to China in a radical move. With the German economy still taking a hit, and the latest numbers showing that a continuation of the decline is imminent, Merkel's government agreed to put some backing behind the German bank to hopefully give the financial situation a boost from within the nation. In September of 2019, China finally focused on international diplomacy, and in meetings with several leaders assured everyone that the situation in Hong Kong, which still had not settled down, would be dealt with shortly. Many were afraid that China would use military force and unleash a conflict that could spill into something greater. But nations like Laos, Vietnam, and North Korea gave great praise to these rumors, piquing the interest of Chinese leader Xi Jinping. A new opportunity presented itself on the chessboard.